The blood on Virginia Lane's dress had dried to a rust-brown stain that made passengers edge away from her at the Hill City train station in South Dakota. Though it was not her blood, and the man who had spilled it was 300 miles behind her now. She stood at the ticket window with trembling hands and a reticule that contained 17 cents, a broken pocket watch that had belonged to her father, and nothing else of value in this world. The ticket master, a thin man with spectacles that magnified his impatient eyes, had already told her twice that the fare to Rapid City was $2.50, and she could see in his expression that he would not tell her a third time. "Please," Virginia whispered, hating the desperation in her voice. "I have family there. If you could just let me send word, they would pay you back. And I have a business to run, miss. Step aside." The words hit her like a physical blow. She moved away from the window, her vision blurring with tears she had thought herself too empty to cry. The November wind of 1883 cut through the thin fabric of her dress, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together pieces that felt irreparably broken. Behind her, the locomotive hissed and groaned, preparing for departure. Freedom was 20 feet away, and it might as well have been on the moon. She sank onto a bench near the platform's edge, no longer caring who saw her cry or what they thought of the blood on her dress. Her husband of 8 months was dead, shot down in a saloon fight that had been none of his making, and his brother had made it clear that morning what he expected from his new widow. The bruises on her wrists were still purple where she had torn free from his grip. She had run with nothing, and now she had nowhere left to run to. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and gentle, and Virginia looked up to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a startling shade of gray, and they held concern rather than the judgment or pity she had been receiving all morning. "I do not mean to intrude," he continued, "but I could not help but notice you are in some distress. Are you injured?" Virginia followed his gaze to the bloodstain and felt fresh shame wash over her. "It is not my blood." "I did not think it was. You are not favoring any wound." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My name is Henry Morrison. I am a rancher from outside town, and I happened to overhear your conversation with the ticket master. I hope you will forgive my boldness, but are you trying to get to Rapid City?" She nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Henry Morrison looked at her for a long moment, and Virginia had the strange sensation of being truly seen for the first time in months. Not assessed for her usefulness or her marriage prospects, not judged for her circumstances, but simply seen as a human being in need. "Wait here," he said, and walked to the ticket window before she could respond. Virginia watched in disbelief as he spoke to the ticket master, pulling bills from his wallet. The transaction took less than a minute, and then he was walking back toward her with 2 tickets in his hand. He held one out to her. "I was heading to Rapid City myself," he said. "Seemed foolish to let you sit here when I was making the journey anyway. I cannot accept this." But even as she said it, her fingers were reaching for the ticket, trembling with hope and disbelief. "I have no way to repay you. I am not asking for repayment." His voice was firm but kind. "The train leaves in 10 minutes. You should board now before you catch your death in this cold." Virginia stood on shaking legs, clutching the ticket like a lifeline. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Henry Morrison settled his hat back on his head, and something in his expression made him look older than his years, which she guessed to be somewhere in his late 20s. "Because someone once did something similar for me when I needed it, and I swore I would pass it forward when I could. And because no woman should look as frightened as you do right now." The train whistle blew, sharp and insistent. Henry offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Virginia took it. His sleeve was clean and smelled of soap and sage, and the steadiness of him made her feel less like she might simply blow apart into pieces. They boarded together, finding seats in a half-empty car. Virginia took the window seat and pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching Hill City begin to slide away as the train lurched into motion. Every rotation of the wheels carried her farther from the nightmare of the past 24 hours, and she felt something in her chest begin to loosen, just slightly. Henry sat beside her but did not press for conversation. He pulled a book from his coat pocket and began to read, giving her the gift of privacy while still providing a barrier between her and the curious stares of other passengers. Virginia was grateful beyond words for his quiet presence. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before she finally found her voice. "I lied to you." Henry looked up from his book, his expression mild. "About what?" "I have no family in Rapid City. I have no family anywhere." The words came out flat and exhausted. "My parents are dead and my husband died yesterday. I just needed to get away." From his brother, Virginia's head snapped around to stare at him. "How did you know? The bruises on your wrists are shaped like finger marks. You kept looking over your shoulder at the station like you expected someone to grab you, and you ran with nothing, which means you left in a hurry." Henry closed his book and set it aside. "My sister went through something similar after her husband died. His family thought she owed them her service in his place. She came to live with me instead. Where is she now? Married to a shopkeeper in Deadwood. 3 children, happy as can be." He paused. "What will you do in Rapid City if you have no one there?" Virginia had been avoiding that question all morning. "Find work, I suppose. I can sew and keep house. Someone will need help. And if they do not?" His voice was not unkind, but the question hung heavy between them. They both knew the limited options available to a woman alone with no references and blood on her dress. "I will manage." Virginia turned back to the window, blinking hard against fresh tears. "I always manage." Henry was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "My ranch could use help. My sister handled the household before she married, and I have been making do on my own for the past year. I am not much of a cook, and the place looks like a tornado hit it most days. I also have a small herd that needs tending, and I could use an extra pair of hands for the lighter work. The pay would not be much, but it would include room and board, and you would be safe there." Virginia turned to look at him, searching his face for any hint of the expectations that usually came with such offers. "You do not know me. I could be a thief or a liar. Are you?" "No." "Then I suppose we will get along fine." He met her gaze steadily. "I am not offering charity, Miss Lane. I genuinely need help, and you genuinely need work. It seems like a practical arrangement to me. You heard my name at the ticket window." "I did. And before you ask, no, I do not expect anything from you beyond honest work. You would have your own room, and I give you my word that you would be treated with respect." He pulled a worn wallet from his pocket and extracted a card. "This is my sister's address in Deadwood. You can write to her if you want a reference for my character. Her name is Hannah Pritchard." The offer was too good, too convenient, and yet Virginia found herself wanting desperately to believe in it. Perhaps it was the quiet honesty in Henry Morrison's eyes, or the way he had not once looked at her with anything other than straightforward kindness. Perhaps she was simply too tired and too frightened to keep running. "I would need to write to your sister first," she said carefully. "Of course. We can send a telegram from the station in Rapid City if you prefer, faster than a letter. And if she says you are a scoundrel—" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first she had seen from him. "Then I will buy you another ticket to wherever you want to go, and you will never have to see me again." Virginia studied him for a long moment, weighing her very limited options against the risk of trusting a stranger. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but I want to send that telegram today." "Fair enough." Henry extended his hand, and after a brief hesitation, Virginia shook it. His grip was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked for his living. They settled back into companionable silence, and Virginia watched the South Dakota landscape roll past the window. The Black Hills rose in the distance, dark pine-covered slopes against a gray November sky. Snow dusted the higher elevations, and she wondered what she was getting herself into, heading into winter with no resources and only the word of a stranger to protect her. But the alternative was going back, and that was no alternative at all. The train pulled into Rapid City just after 3 in the afternoon. The town was bigger than Hill City, with broad streets and substantial buildings that spoke of gold rush prosperity not quite faded. Henry retrieved a worn leather bag from the overhead rack and offered to carry Virginia's belongings before remembering she had none. "We will need to get you some things," he said as they stepped onto the platform. "A proper coat at minimum. The ranch gets cold this time of year. I cannot accept more charity from you. It is an advance on your wages." His tone left no room for argument. "You will work it off soon enough. Come on, the telegraph office is this way." They walked down the main street, and Virginia was acutely aware of the picture they must make. Him in clean working clothes and a good hat, her in a blood-stained dress and no coat, clutching a near-empty reticule. But if Henry was embarrassed to be seen with her, he gave no sign. He simply walked at an easy pace, nodding to people who greeted him and making sure she kept up. The telegraph office was warm and smelled of paper and ink. Henry wrote out the message himself after consulting with Virginia. "Hannah. Have offered employment to Miss Virginia Lane from Hill City. She requests reference for my character. Please reply soonest. Henry." They paid for the message and for a reply, and then Henry led her to a general store 2 doors down. Inside, he was all business, selecting a heavy wool coat, 2 serviceable dresses, a nightgown, undergarments, boots, and a hairbrush without consulting her much on the choices. Virginia started to protest the expense, but he silenced her with a look. "You need these things. We will call it part of your wages for the first 3 months. That seems fair to me." The proprietor, a plump woman with sharp eyes, wrapped everything in brown paper and tied it with string. She looked between Henry and Virginia with obvious curiosity, but Henry simply paid her and wished her a good day, offering no explanation. They returned to the telegraph office and found a reply already waiting. Henry handed it to Virginia to read. "Henry is the most decent man I know. Miss Lane would be lucky to work for him. Stay for dinner when you deliver her. Hannah." Virginia read the message twice, something tight in her chest beginning to ease. "She sounds very certain of you. She is my sister. She has to be nice." But he smiled as he said it, and Virginia found herself almost smiling back. "So do we go to the ranch now?" "Not quite. There is one more stop I need to make." Henry led her out of the telegraph office and down a side street to a small white church with a neat yard. He knocked on the door, and after a moment an older woman answered. Her face lit up when she saw Henry. "Henry Morrison, it has been too long. Come in, come in." Then she saw Virginia and her expression shifted to concern. "Oh, my dear, what has happened to you, Mrs. Fletcher? This is Miss Virginia Lane. She has had some trouble and will be working at my ranch. I was hoping you might have a place she could wash up and change into fresh clothes. We have a long ride ahead, and I do not want her traveling in that dress." Mrs. Fletcher needed no further explanation. She took in the bloodstain and Virginia's exhausted face, and her expression softened into pure compassion. "Of course. Come with me, dear. I will heat some water and you can have some privacy." She led Virginia to a small room behind the church kitchen and bustled about heating water and finding towels. When she left Virginia alone, the silence was almost overwhelming. Virginia stripped off the ruined dress, the dress she had worn to identify her husband's body, the dress she had been wearing when his brother had cornered her in the kitchen, and told her exactly what he expected from her now. She washed carefully in the warm water, scrubbing away dried blood and the grime of fear and travel. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a pale, hollow-eyed woman of 21 who looked at least 5 years older. There was a bruise on her jaw she did not remember getting, probably from when she had fought her way free that morning. The new dress was simple gray wool, practical and warm. It fit well enough, and when Virginia emerged from the room, Mrs. Fletcher took the ruined dress without comment and handed her the package of other new things. "Henry is a good man," she said quietly. "Whatever has happened to you, you are safe with him." Virginia wanted to believe that. She was choosing to believe that, for now at least. They found Henry waiting in the churchyard with 2 horses, a sturdy bay and a smaller paint mare. He looked her over critically, nodded his approval, and helped her mount the mare. It had been years since Virginia had ridden, but the horse was gentle and patient with her uncertain seat. "It is about 8 miles to the ranch," Henry said as they rode out of town. "We should make it before full dark." The afternoon was cold but clear, and as they left Rapid City behind, Virginia felt herself breathing easier. The land rolled out in all directions, brown grassland dotted with pine and scrub. In the distance, the black hills rose like dark promises against the sky. It was beautiful in a stark, honest way that made her chest ache. Henry rode in silence for a while, then began pointing out landmarks. The creek where he sometimes fished, the stand of cottonwoods where he had found a lost calf last spring, the ridge where his property line began. He talked easily, not requiring much response from her, just filling the silence with ordinary things that made the world feel a little more normal. The sun was hanging low on the horizon when they crested a rise, and Henry pointed ahead. "There it is." Virginia saw a collection of buildings in a small valley, a house, a barn, a couple of outbuildings. It was modest but well-maintained, with smoke rising from the chimney and a windmill turning lazily in the breeze. As they drew closer, she could see that the house was larger than she had expected, a proper 2-story structure with a wide porch. "I built most of it myself," Henry said, and there was quiet pride in his voice. "Started with just the barn and a dugout, added the house over the past 5 years. There is still work to be done, but it is solid and warm." They rode into the yard, and a large yellow dog came bounding out to greet them, tail wagging furiously. Henry dismounted and scratched the dog's ears. "This is Goldie. She looks fierce but would not hurt a fly. Mostly she just eats and sleeps and occasionally remembers to bark at strangers." Virginia climbed down from the mare with less grace, her legs stiff from the unaccustomed riding. Goldie came over to sniff her thoroughly, then apparently decided she was acceptable and went back to Henry. "Come on, I will show you around before it gets too dark." Henry led her toward the house, and Virginia followed, still not quite believing this was happening. The inside of the house was exactly as he had described it. Clean but chaotic, with dishes piled in the kitchen and papers scattered across a desk in the corner. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and a good fire burned in the stone fireplace. It was a bachelor's house, functional and plain, but there was nothing about it that felt threatening. Henry showed her upstairs to a small bedroom under the eaves. It held a bed, a dresser, a chair, and a small window that looked out toward the hills. This was Hannah's room. The linens are clean, I washed them after she left. If you need anything else, let me know. Virginia set down her package and looked around the simple room. It was more than she had expected, more than she felt she deserved. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of this. You are welcome. Now I am going to tend the horses. The kitchen is downstairs, and you should feel free to eat if you are hungry. There is bread and some cheese, and I think some apples in the basket. I will make something more substantial for supper once I finish with the animals." He left her alone, and Virginia sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden quiet. Just this morning she had been running for her life. Now she was in a strange house 8 miles from the nearest town, depending on the charity of a man she had met only hours ago. It should have felt more frightening than it did. Instead, she felt mostly tired, and something that might have been the very beginning of relief. She went downstairs after a few minutes and explored the kitchen. It was well stocked but disorganized, and her fingers itched to put things in order. She found the bread and cheese Henry had mentioned and made herself eat a little, though she had no appetite. Then she filled a kettle with water and set it on the stove to heat, and began washing the stack of dishes in the sink. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when Henry came back in, stamping snow from his boots. He stopped short when he saw what she was doing. "You do not have to start working right this minute," he said. "Take the evening to settle in. I would rather keep busy." Virginia scrubbed at a stubborn pot. "If you do not mind." "I do not mind at all." He hung his coat and hat on a peg by the door. "In that case, I will see what I can do about supper." They worked in companionable silence, Henry frying up bacon and potatoes while Virginia finished the dishes and started putting the kitchen to rights. It was strange, this domestic quiet with a man she barely knew, but it was also oddly comfortable. Henry was not a talker, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and genuine. They ate at a simple wooden table and the food was plain but good. Virginia discovered she was hungrier than she had thought, and she cleaned her plate while Henry told her about the ranch. He had 24 cattle, a few horses, some chickens. He grew hay and vegetables in the summer, hunted and fished to supplement their stores. It was a hard living but an honest one, and he was clearly proud of what he had built. "How did you come to be here?" Virginia asked. "You do not sound like you were born in South Dakota." "Ohio originally. My father had a farm there, but after he died, my brother got the land. Hannah and I decided to try our luck out west. She met her husband in Deadwood, and I found this valley and knew I wanted to make it mine." He paused. "What about you? Where are you from?" "Missouri. My parents had a farm too, but they both died of fever when I was 17. I had no siblings and the land was mortgaged. I went to work for a family in Kansas City, and that is where I met my husband." She swallowed hard. "He was a good man, better than I deserved. He brought me out here because he thought he could make a better life for us. But he got into a fight in a saloon that was not his doing, and someone pulled a gun. I am sorry. So am I." Virginia stared at her plate. "His brother blamed me, said if I had been a better wife, if I had given them sons, my husband would have stayed home where he belonged. After the funeral, he told me I belonged to him now, that it was his right as next of kin. I ran while he was out that morning." Henry's jaw tightened. "He had no right. You are not property. The law might not agree with you, then the law is wrong." He said it with such conviction that Virginia almost believed him. They finished eating, and Virginia insisted on washing up again. Henry did not argue, just banked the fire and checked that the doors were locked. It was full dark outside now, the kind of deep darkness that only came in the country, far from city lights. You should rest, Henry said. Tomorrow will be a long day. I need to ride into town to pick up some supplies, and I thought you might come with me. We can stop by the church again if you want to talk to Mrs. Fletcher more, and you can get a feel for Rapid City. That sounds good. Virginia dried the last dish and hung the towel to dry. Henry, why are you being so kind to me? He considered the question seriously. I suppose because I know what it is like to be alone and scared. When Hannah and I first came out here, we had almost nothing. People helped us when they did not have to, and it made all the difference. I figure I should do the same when I can. He paused. And maybe because you looked like you needed help more than anyone I have seen in a long time. Virginia felt tears prick her eyes again. I do not know how to thank you. You do not have to thank me. Just work hard and be honest, and we will get along fine. He smiled slightly. Now go on and get some sleep. The rooster will wake you at dawn whether you are ready or not. Virginia climbed the stairs to her small room, closed the door, and sat on the bed in the darkness. Outside, she could hear the wind picking up and the distant call of a coyote. It was a lonely sound, but somehow not as lonely as she had felt standing at that train station this morning. She changed into the new nightgown, climbed under the quilts, and was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. She woke to pale dawn light and the sound of Henry moving around downstairs. For a moment she could not remember where she was, and panic seized her before memory returned. She was at the ranch. She was safe. She dressed quickly in the other new dress, a simple blue calico, and braided her dark hair before heading downstairs. Henry was making coffee, and he poured her a cup without asking. Morning. How did you sleep? Better than I expected. Virginia accepted the coffee gratefully. What do you need me to do today? Come to town with me like I said. After that, we will figure out a routine. The chickens need feeding, the house needs general maintenance, cooking and such. Nothing too strenuous. I handle all the heavy ranch work. They had a quick breakfast of oatmeal and more coffee, and then Henry hitched up a wagon. The ride to Rapid City took about an hour, and Henry spent it pointing out more of the land, telling her about his neighbors, explaining how the seasons worked this far north. Virginia listened and asked questions, and slowly the knot of fear in her chest continued to ease. In town, Henry introduced her to the shopkeepers as his new housekeeper, and if anyone thought the arrangement was suspicious, they kept it to themselves. Henry Morrison was clearly well-liked and respected in Rapid City, and people seemed willing to extend that respect to anyone under his protection. They stopped at the church, and Virginia spent an hour talking with Mrs. Fletcher while Henry ran his errands. The older woman asked gentle questions and offered no judgment, and by the time they left, Virginia felt she had made her first real friend in South Dakota. On the ride back to the ranch, Virginia felt something shift inside her. The terror that had been her constant companion for the past 2 days was still there, but it was muted now, pushed back by the simple kindness of strangers who had chosen to help when they did not have to. Henry, she said as the ranch came into view, I will work hard for you, I promise. I know you will, he replied simply, and that was that. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Virginia rose early to feed the chickens and make breakfast. She spent her days cleaning and organizing the house, mending clothes, preparing meals. Henry was gone much of the time, tending cattle or fixing fences or doing any of the 100 other tasks that kept the ranch running. In the evenings, they ate together and talked about ordinary things. It was the ordinariness that Virginia found most healing. There was no drama, no danger, just the steady progression of days and work and seasons. The house slowly transformed under her care, becoming less chaotic and more like a real home. She organized the kitchen properly, washed all the curtains, scrubbed floors that probably had not been properly cleaned in a year. Henry never commented directly on the changes, but she caught him looking around with a small, pleased smile more than once. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing snow and bitter cold. Virginia had never experienced a northern winter before, and the sheer force of it was breathtaking. Henry made sure she had warm clothes and taught her how to dress in layers. He showed her how to split kindling and keep the fires going, how to tell when the animals needed extra feed because of the cold. They were snowed in for 3 days just before Christmas, and Virginia discovered that being trapped inside with Henry Morrison was not unpleasant. He was an easy companion, content with silence, but also willing to talk about anything from books to politics to his dreams for expanding the ranch. He had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on her, and she found herself laughing more than she had in years. On Christmas Eve, Henry came in from the barn carrying a small pine tree. "I thought we should have something to mark the day," he said, almost shyly. Hannah always insisted on it. They spent the evening decorating the tree with paper chains Virginia made and strings of popcorn. Henry produced a bottle of cider he had been saving, and they toasted to surviving the winter so far. It was simple and sweet, and Virginia went to bed that night feeling something she had almost forgotten: contentment. "I got you something," Henry said on Christmas morning, handing her a wrapped package. Virginia opened it to find a beautiful leather-bound journal and a pen. "Henry, this is too much. You mentioned once that you used to keep a diary when you were younger. I thought you might like to start again." He looked uncomfortable, like he was worried he had overstepped. "I love it, thank you." Virginia wished she had something to give him in return, but she had no money of her own yet. "I am sorry I do not have anything for you. You have given me a clean house and good food and decent conversation. That is gift enough." He smiled at her, and Virginia felt her heart do something strange in her chest. She ignored the feeling. Henry Morrison was her employer and her savior, and she would not ruin that by developing foolish romantic notions. He had been nothing but respectful and kind, and she owed him her gratitude, not her unwanted affection. But as the winter deepened and they spent more time trapped inside by weather, Virginia found it increasingly difficult to remember why she should not care for him. Henry was everything her late husband had not been: steady, thoughtful, genuinely kind. He never raised his voice, never made her feel small or stupid, never expected more from her than honest work. He also made her laugh, which she had not expected. He told terrible jokes and had a gift for finding humor in ordinary situations. When she accidentally burned a pot of beans, he declared it was good practice for making charcoal, and they ended up laughing so hard they both had tears in their eyes. In January, Virginia's 22nd birthday came and went unmarked because she did not mention it. But 2 days later, Henry presented her with a cake he had somehow managed to bake in secret. "Mrs. Fletcher told me when your birthday was," he admitted. "I know it is late, but I wanted to acknowledge it." The cake was lopsided and slightly burned on one side, but it was the sweetest thing anyone had done for her in years. Virginia felt tears sting her eyes as she cut them each a slice. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to. You are 22 now, officially an old woman. We should mark the occasion." She threw a dish towel at him, and he caught it with a grin that made her heart race. That night, writing in her journal by candlelight, Virginia admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny. She was falling in love with Henry Morrison. It was a terrifying realization. Her husband had been dead for less than 3 months. She was living in Henry's house, dependent on his charity for her very survival. She had no right to these feelings, no right to want more than he had already given her. But the heart, Virginia was discovering, did not much care about rights or propriety. It simply felt what it felt. She tried to hide it, to keep her growing affection locked away where Henry would never see it. She focused on her work, on keeping the house perfect, on being the best employee he could ask for. She did not let herself stare at him too long when he came in from the cold with snow in his hair. She did not allow herself to imagine what it might be like if he kissed her. She was not entirely successful. February brought a brief thaw, and Henry suggested they ride out to check on the cattle. Virginia had become a more confident rider over the winter months, and she was eager to see more of the ranch. They rode for hours through terrain that was breathtaking in its stark beauty. Henry showed her where he planned to build a new barn in the spring, where the best fishing was, where his property line extended to. He talked about his plans with an enthusiasm that was infectious, and Virginia found herself caught up in his vision. "I want to build something that lasts," he said as they sat on a ridge overlooking the valley. "Something I can pass down someday, a real legacy, to your children." Virginia asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Henry was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think I would have a family by now. I am 28, not exactly young anymore. But I have been focused on building the ranch, and I suppose I figured the rest would work itself out eventually." "You would make a good father." Virginia said it before she could stop herself and then felt her cheeks heat. "I just mean you are patient and kind. Those are good qualities. You would make a good mother." Henry's voice was quiet, and when Virginia looked at him, his gray eyes were studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are strong and smart and good with your hands, and you have a kind heart despite everything that has been done to you." They stared at each other for a moment that stretched too long, and Virginia felt the air between them change into something electric. Then Henry cleared his throat and looked away. "We should head back. Looks like more snow coming." They rode home in silence, but something had shifted. Virginia could feel it humming between them, unspoken but undeniable. That night, she found Henry sitting by the fire, staring into the flames with a distant expression. She had been about to go upstairs to bed, but something made her stop. "Are you all right?" He looked up, and the expression in his eyes made her heart stutter. "Virginia, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear me out before you respond." She sat down slowly in the chair across from him. "All right. I know you have only been here a few months. I know you came here because you had nowhere else to go, and I promised you safety and employment and nothing more. I know your husband has been gone less than half a year, and you probably need more time before you even think about any of this." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I find myself in a situation where I have to be honest with you because it is affecting my ability to think clearly." Virginia's pulse was racing. "What situation?" "I am falling in love with you." He said it simply, meeting her eyes directly. "I did not plan for it to happen, and I tried to talk myself out of it because the timing is terrible and you have been through so much. But I cannot seem to stop myself from caring about you more each day. The way you hum when you cook, the way you laugh at my terrible jokes, the way you light up when you talk about books, the way you have made this house feel like a home instead of just a place I sleep." Virginia could barely breathe. "Henry, I am not asking you to say anything right now. I am not expecting you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know, because keeping it to myself was becoming impossible." He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "If this makes you uncomfortable, if you want to make other arrangements, I will help you do that. I will not keep you here if my feelings make you uneasy. But I had to be honest with you because you deserve honesty." Virginia sat frozen, her mind racing. She should be cautious. She should take time to think. She should protect her heart and not rush into anything when she was still so vulnerable. Instead, she heard herself say, "I am falling in love with you too." Henry's head snapped up. "You are." "I have been trying not to." It seemed like a terrible idea, falling for my employer when I have been here such a short time. But I cannot help it. You are good and kind, and you make me feel safe in a way I have never felt safe before. You make me laugh. You make me want to believe in good things again. They stared at each other across the firelit room. Then Henry stood and crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "May I hold your hand?" he asked softly. Virginia nodded, and he took her hand in both of his. His touch was warm and gentle, and she felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not want to rush you," Henry said. "You have been through trauma and you need time to heal, but I want you to know that my feelings are real and I will wait as long as you need. There is no pressure, no expectation. We can take this as slowly as you want." "What if I do not want to go slowly?" Virginia whispered. Henry's eyes widened slightly. "Then we will go at whatever pace feels right to you. This is your choice, Virginia. It will always be your choice." She squeezed his hand, feeling something tight and fearful in her chest finally begin to loosen. "I want to try. I want to see where this goes. Are you sure?" "I am not sure about anything except that I care about you and I trust you. That seems like enough to start with." Henry smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That is more than enough." He stood and pulled her gently to her feet. For a moment they just stood there, hands clasped, looking at each other. Then Henry reached up slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his free hand. "May I kiss you?" Virginia nodded, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Henry leaned in slowly and pressed his lips to hers, soft and careful and sweet. It was nothing like kissing her husband had been, which had always felt more like an obligation than a pleasure. This felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, and Virginia felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face them together. Over the following weeks, Virginia and Henry navigated their new relationship with care and tenderness. They held hands by the fire in the evenings. They stole kisses when the mood struck them. They talked about everything, their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Henry told her about growing up in Ohio, about his father's harshness and his mother's quiet strength, about how he and Hannah had left as soon as they were old enough, determined to build better lives for themselves, about the loneliness of those first years in South Dakota, working brutal hours to turn raw land into a functioning ranch. Virginia told him about her parents, about the fever that had taken them both within days of each other, about the fear and poverty that had followed, about taking the first job she could find just to survive, about her marriage to a man she had barely known, a man who had been kind enough but who she had never truly loved, about the relief she felt admitting that, the guilt that she could not mourn him the way a widow should. "You do not have to feel guilty," Henry said, holding her close one evening. "You did the best you could with what you had. That is all any of us can do. I just feel like I am betraying him somehow, being happy so soon after his death." Would he have wanted you to be miserable forever? Virginia thought about it. No, he would have wanted me to be safe and cared for. He was a good man, even if we were not well matched. Then honor his memory by allowing yourself to heal and move forward. That is not betrayal. That is survival. In March, the snow began to melt in earnest, and the ranch came back to life. Henry was busy from dawn to dusk with calving season and fence repairs, and all the tasks that had been waiting for better weather. Virginia helped where she could, and she found she loved the work despite its difficulty. One evening in late March, Henry came in from the barn with mud on his boots and exhaustion in his face. Virginia had supper ready, and she served him a plate before sitting down across from him. "Long day?" she asked. "2 calves born, 1 breech that took hours to sort out. But they are both healthy, so it was worth it." He ate hungrily for a few minutes, then set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Virginia, I need to ask you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about the future a lot lately. About what I want my life to look like. And I realize that every vision I have includes you." He paused. "I know we have only been courting a few months. I know by some standards that is not long enough. But I am 28 years old, and I know my own mind. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. I want to build this ranch with you, raise children with you, grow old with you." Virginia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Henry, I am asking you to marry me." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Not because you owe me anything, and not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I love you and I believe you love me, and I think we could be happy together. What do you say?" Virginia thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago, crying at a train station with no hope and no future. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had healed in this house with this man. She thought about the life they could build together, the partnership they had already begun. "Yes," she said, and then laughed through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Henry came around the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "When?" he asked. "As soon as possible. I do not want to wait." "Next week, then. We will go to Rapid City and find the minister. Do it properly." They were married on a bright April morning in the same church where Virginia had first cleaned herself up and changed into fresh clothes. Hannah and her family came down from Deadwood, and Mrs. Fletcher stood as Virginia's witness. It was a small wedding, simple and quick, but it was perfect. Virginia wore a new dress of cream linen, and Henry wore his best suit. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Henry kissed her with such tenderness that Virginia felt her heart might burst. They had a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with Hannah and her family staying for supper. Virginia watched Henry laugh with his sister and play with her children, and she could picture so clearly the family they would have together. That night, alone in the room that was now theirs, Henry was gentle and patient, making sure Virginia felt safe and cherished. It was so different from her first marriage, where intimacy had been awkward and often painful. With Henry, it felt like an extension of the love and trust they had already built. "I love you," he whispered against her hair afterward. "I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy." "You already do," Virginia replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but full of joy. They worked side by side to improve the ranch, adding buildings and expanding the herd. Virginia learned to rope and brand cattle, to help with difficult birthings, to do 100 things she had never imagined doing. Henry taught her with patience and praise, never making her feel inadequate for not knowing things. In turn, Virginia made their house a true home, with curtains she sewed herself and a garden she planted that first spring. She learned to cook for a rancher's appetite, to preserve food for the winter, to make soap and candles and all the other necessities of frontier life. They entertained friends on Sunday afternoons, hosting dinners where neighbors shared news and gossip. Virginia found she loved these gatherings, loved being part of a community, loved the way Henry would catch her eye across the room and smile like she was the most important person in his world. In August, Virginia realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure before telling Henry, but when she did, His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Are you sure?" he asked, setting her down carefully like she was made of glass. "As sure as I can be without a doctor. But yes, I think so. We are having a baby." He said it with such wonder that Virginia started crying, and then they were both laughing and crying and holding each other. The pregnancy was not easy. Virginia was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Henry was endlessly patient, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, holding her hair when she vomited, never complaining about the meals that went unmade. By November, she was feeling better and starting to show. Henry talked to her belly every night, telling his unborn child about the ranch and all the adventures they would have together. Virginia would stroke his hair and feel overwhelmed with love for this man, who had saved her life in every way that mattered. Their son was born on a snowy March morning in 1885, attended by Hannah and Mrs. Fletcher. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Virginia thought she might die from the pain. But Henry was there the whole time, holding her hand and talking her through each contraction, and when their baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Virginia fell in love all over again. "He is beautiful," Henry whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You are both so beautiful." They named him James, after Virginia's father, and he had Henry's gray eyes and Virginia's dark hair. He was a loud, demanding baby who rarely slept through the night, and they were both exhausted and deliriously happy. Virginia discovered she loved being a mother, loved the weight of her son in her arms and the way he depended on her completely. Henry was a natural father, patient and playful and endlessly gentle. He would walk the floor with James for hours when the baby was fussy, singing old songs his mother had taught him. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Henry hired 2 ranch hands to help with the growing herd, and he built a larger barn and a bunkhouse for the men. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable, and that was more than either of them had ever expected. In the summer of 1887, Virginia gave birth to twin daughters, Lucy and Laura. The girls were identical, with their mother's dark hair and delicate features, and they completed the family in a way Virginia had not known she needed. Life was chaotic with 3 children under 3, but it was good. Henry would come in from the fields to find Virginia surrounded by babies, flour in her hair and spit up on her dress, and he would kiss her and tell her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "I must look like a disaster," she would protest. "You look like a woman who is building a life and a family. That is the most beautiful thing in the world." The years passed in a blur of seasons and work and love. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who followed his father everywhere. The twins were wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief. In 1890, Virginia gave birth to another daughter, Rose, who was quiet and gentle and loved nothing more than sitting in her mother's lap while Virginia read to her. Henry expanded the ranch until it was one of the most successful in the region. He built a proper 2-story house to replace the original, with a parlor and a dining room and bedrooms for all their children. Virginia planted trees around the house and cultivated a large garden that provided vegetables all summer. They had hard times too. There were harsh winters that killed cattle, dry summers that made water scarce. There were injuries and illnesses, close calls that left them shaken and grateful. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other and from the family they had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry took Virginia into Rapid City for dinner, leaving the children with Hannah for the night. They ate at the nicest restaurant in town and talked like they had when they were first falling in love. You ever regret it? Virginia asked. Taking a chance on a crying woman at a train station. Henry reached across the table and took her hand, just like he had that first time he had asked her to marry him. Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Virginia Morrison. You and our children and this life we have built. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the night James had croup and we thought we were going to lose him. Even that. Because we did not lose him and we got through it together. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I did not think that was possible. I love you too, more than I have words for. They walked through Rapid City hand in hand, and Virginia thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear and loss and desperation that had left her standing at a train station with no hope, the kindness of a stranger who had seen her distress and acted without expecting anything in return, the slow building of trust and friendship that had blossomed into love. She thought about how different her life might have been if Henry had not been at that station that day. If he had not bought 2 tickets and offered her safety, if he had not been patient with her healing and gentle with her heart. What are you thinking about? Henry asked. Just how lucky I am, how easily things could have gone differently. I am the lucky one. I was building a ranch, but I was not building a life. Not really. You gave me that. You and the children. They stopped at the overlook at the edge of town, looking out at the black hills in the distance. The same hills Virginia had seen from the train that first day, when she had been too frightened and exhausted to appreciate their beauty. Now they represented home, safety, the life she had built from ashes. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving me. You saved yourself, Henry replied. You had the courage to run, to accept help, to take a chance on a stranger. All I did was buy a train ticket. You did so much more than that. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to believe in good things again. You gave me love when I did not think I deserved it. Everyone deserves love. Henry pulled her close. Especially you. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the sun set over the hills and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, Virginia could see the lights of their ranch, where their children were probably driving Hannah crazy and the animals needed tending and life was waiting for them. We should get back, she said eventually. We should, Henry agreed, but neither of them moved. Finally, they walked back to the wagon, climbed up, and headed for home. The road was familiar now, every turn and landmark as known to Virginia as her own face. This was her land, her life, her love. When they arrived at the ranch, the children came running out to greet them, and Virginia scooped up Rose while Henry grabbed the twins. James stood a bit apart, trying to act grown up at 7 years old, and Henry ruffled his hair and pulled him into the family embrace. Did you have a good time? Hannah asked from the porch. The best, Virginia said, meaning it completely. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Virginia sat at the kitchen table with her journal, the one Henry had given her that first Christmas. She paged through years of entries, tracking their journey from strangers to lovers to partners to parents. She picked up her pen and wrote, 10 years ago today, I married the man who saved my life. I did not know then that saving my life would be just the beginning. He also saved my heart, my hope, my ability to believe in love and goodness. We have built something beautiful together in this wild place, and I am grateful every day for the courage it took to accept his help when I needed it most. Our children are healthy, our ranch is thriving, and my heart is so full I think it might burst. I am no longer the frightened woman crying at a train station. I am Virginia Morrison, wife and mother and rancher, and I am finally, completely home. She closed the journal and went upstairs to where Henry was already in bed, reading by lamplight. He set the book aside when she came in, and she climbed in beside him, fitting herself against his side the way she had 1,000 times before. "Happy anniversary," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "Happy anniversary." Virginia closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt nothing but peace. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. James grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, who would eventually take over its running when Henry got too old for the hard work. The twins remained close, finishing each other's sentences and getting into trouble together. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman who loved books and learning, who would eventually become a teacher in Rapid City. Virginia and Henry grew older together, their hands becoming weathered and their hair turning gray, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated each anniversary, each birthday, each milestone with gratitude for the life they had built. When Virginia was 45, she found Henry on the porch one evening, looking out at the land they had shaped together. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Just remembering that first day at the train station, how scared you looked, how certain I was that I needed to help you, even though I had no idea where it would lead. You think we were meant to find each other?" Henry considered this. "I do not know about meant, but I think we were both looking for something, even if we did not know it. We were both looking for home, and somehow we found it in each other." Virginia took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I never thanked you properly, you know, for the train ticket. You have thanked me every day for 20 years by building this life with me, by being my partner and my love and the mother of my children, by choosing me every single day." He squeezed her hand. "If anything, I am the one who should be thanking you." "For what?" "For trusting me when you had no reason to. For taking a chance on a stranger. For loving me even though you had every reason to be afraid of love. For making this house a home and this ranch a place worth coming back to at the end of every day." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the first stars appeared. Around them, their ranch hummed with life, chickens settling into their roost, cattle lowing in the distance, their children's voices drifting from inside the house. "We did good, did we not?" Virginia said. "We did great," Henry replied and pulled her close. They lived to see all their children married and starting families of their own. They lived to hold grandchildren and teach them about the land and the work. They lived to celebrate 50 years of marriage, surrounded by 3 generations of Morrisons who owed their existence to a cowboy who had bought 2 train tickets on a November day in 1883. Virginia never forgot that moment at the train station, never forgot what it felt like to be so desperate and so lost. And because she never forgot, she made sure to look out for others in need, to extend the same kindness that had been shown to her. She and Henry became known throughout the region for their generosity, for always having a meal or a bed for those who needed it. "We are just passing it forward," Henry would say whenever someone thanked them. "Someone did it for us once." When Virginia was 73, she took sick with pneumonia during a hard winter. Despite the doctor's best efforts and Henry's constant care, she knew her time was coming to an end. She was ready, tired after a long and full life, but she worried about leaving Henry alone. "Do not fret about me," he said, holding her hand as he had so many times over the years. "I will be fine. We have had a good life, Virginia, such a good life. The best," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me." Henry kissed her forehead, and Virginia closed her eyes, feeling nothing but peace. She died 3 days later, surrounded by her children and grandchildren with Henry's hand in hers. Her last thought was of a train station and a kind-eyed stranger, and a ticket that had led to everything good in her life. Henry lived another 5 years, staying active on the ranch with James's help. He never remarried, though people tried to set him up. He would just smile and say he had already had the great love of his life, and once was enough. On a spring morning in 1938, Henry died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83. His children buried him next to Virginia on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years before. On their shared headstone, James carved words his father had told him once. She was crying at the train station. I bought 2 tickets and took her home. She gave me everything. The ranch stayed in the Morrison family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each one adding their own mark while honoring the foundation that Virginia and Henry had built. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. Your great-great-grandfather saw a woman in need and helped her, parents would tell their children. And that one act of kindness created all of this, all of us. The house Henry built still stood, added onto and modernized but still recognizably the same. The barn where he had sheltered those first cattle still served its purpose. The land they had shaped with their own hands continued to thrive. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the prairie, some claimed they could still hear echoes of laughter from the porch where Virginia and Henry had sat so many nights, talking and planning, and simply being together. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting from a moment of desperate need and unexpected kindness. Their love story began with tears at a train station and a stranger who chose to help. It grew through trust and patience and genuine affection. It flourished in hard work and partnership and mutual respect. And it ended only when death finally parted them, after more than 50 years of the kind of love that most people only dream about. The Morrison family knew they owed their entire existence to that moment when Henry had heard Virginia crying and made the simple, radical choice to do something about it. To buy 2 tickets instead of 1. To offer safety with no strings attached. To see a human being in distress and respond with kindness. It was not a grand gesture, not some epic act of heroism. It was just one decent man doing the right thing for someone who needed help. But from that small seed of kindness grew a mighty tree. A family, a legacy, a love that literally changed the course of countless lives. Years later, when asked what made their marriage so successful, Henry had said, "We chose each other every day." Not just that first day at the station, but every day after. Through hard times and good, through sickness and health, through all the ordinary moments that make up a life. We chose each other and we chose love. And that, in the end, was their real legacy. Not the ranch or the land or the material things they had built, but the example they set of what love could be. Patient and kind, lasting and true, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. Their story proved that sometimes the most important moments in our lives come when we least expect them. That kindness to strangers can change everything. That love can heal even the deepest wounds. That 2 people who seem to have nothing in common can build a life together that matters. Virginia Lane, who had once stood crying at a train station with no ticket and no hope, lived to become Virginia Morrison. Beloved wife and mother and grandmother, pillar of her community, and living proof that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to help. And Henry Morrison, who had gone to town that day to buy supplies and happened to be at the train station at exactly the right moment, lived to build not just a successful ranch, but a family legacy that would endure for generations. Their love story was not perfect. They had arguments and hard times, moments of doubt and frustration. But through it all, they had each other. They had the memory of that first act of kindness, that leap of faith, that choice to trust when trust seemed impossible. They had built their love on solid ground: respect, communication, genuine affection, and the kind of partnership where both people worked toward common goals. They had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, and created a family together. And in the end, that was everything. The crying woman at the train station found her home. The cowboy who bought 2 tickets found his heart. Together, they found a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, echoing through the generations they created and the land they shaped. It was, in every sense, a love story for the ages. Born in desperation and kindness, nurtured through patience and trust, and lasting until death and beyond. The kind of love that proves happy endings are not just for fairy tales, but for real people who choose each other, day after day, year after year, until death parts them, and even then does not truly end. Virginia and Henry Morrison. A cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him right back, and together built something beautiful that would last forever.